and welcome to another video from Colour with Claire. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I do like to have fun on this channel and I'm thinking of ways to try and make colouring more fun and more interesting for you guys. And this is one of the ideas that I had right back last year when I first got the colour catalogue. Now if you don't know what the colour catalogue is, I've done a whole video on it where I show you exactly how it works and I go through it step by step. But basically it's a fantastic resource. It's a collection of colour palettes that you can find your way around on this interactive PDF. You can search by colour, you can search by theme, you can search by collection, and it just makes everything so much easier for choosing colours. So if you want to see exactly what the colour catalogue's all about, I'll leave a link in the description for my previous video review. So the video idea that I had last year when I got this was to colour something using one of the colour palettes from the colour catalogue. And, you know, with various time constraints and the amount of videos that I do and the amount of ideas I've got and the lack of time to do it all, it just kind of fell by the wayside. And then recently I've seen a lot of channels doing this and it kind of reminded me and kicked me into touch a little bit that I needed to get mine done. So you will find a similar video on Bailey J's channel, and Rachel from Pencil Stash did one. There's a couple more floating around. So yeah, basically it just reminded me that I need to do one. So here in front of me is the colour catalogue. This is the page that you start off with. Now I've been looking at the palettes, and the first thing I thought I need to do is actually choose an illustration from a colouring book that we're going to colour in, because I think when we've got the illustration in front of us, we can then sort of see what kind of palette we need to be searching for. So I've chosen from this book here, which is Fantasia by Nicholas Chandra Wianata. I've chosen this one here. And it's what looks like a knight or a Prince Charming sat astride his horse. We've got a sky background, we've got some ruins, castles, kind of mountainous rocks, we've also got some water, we've got some grass. So there's quite a lot of different things going on in this one picture. So looking at this, I'm thinking landscapes and nature really is going to be the most kind of prominent thing on the page because of all the background that we've got. But also, you know, we've also got metallics and things that will need a different kind of colour scheme than nature. So like I say, the armour and the uniform and things like that. So I went looking through the colour catalogue, and the first thing I did was browse by keywords, and I decided to look first of all at landscapes. So I'm clicking on landscape there, and you can see that it comes up with loads and loads of different landscape kind of palettes. So the one I was looking at, which I think will serve as well for this picture, is palette number 104. It's this one here, and the keywords for this are forest, greenery, landscape, nature and mountains, which kind of sums up the background of our page. But what about all of those metallics and of course the flowers that are everywhere here? We've got this big rose on his shield and little flowers on the horse's bridle, I think that's called. So I'm thinking that this one is fantastic because we've got red or a pinkish red for the flowers. We've got blue for the sky. We've got different greys, which could be silvery for the armour. And we've also got the greens for the landscape as well. So this one, perfect, I think. So what I decided to do was, even though I'm limited to these 6 colours, was to choose either a lighter or a darker version of that colour to go along with it. So I'll explain what I mean. So first of all, this one here, we have it's sort of like a cold grey, a mid-cold grey. So I chose for this one Prismacolor 50% Cool Grey. I then chose 20% Cool Grey to go alongside it so that we've got a variation in tones and it's not just going to be 6 colours on their own. We need to have a bit of variation to jazz it up a little bit. So that's the first 2 colours I chose. We've then got this one here which looks like a very deep kind of foresty green. So for that one I chose Prussian Green as the nearest match. And I then chose Apple Green as its lighter counterpart. Moving on, we have this one here. It looks like a very kind of mossy, olivey kind of green, and for that I chose Lime Peel. That was the closest I could find in my Prismas. And to go with it, I chose a darker shade this time of Moss Green. Next up, we've got the beautiful blue, which is most comparable to the cerulean blue from the Prismas. and then I chose Copenhagen Blue as its darker partner. Next up we have another grey, but this one is much more of a warm tone and it's much lighter than the previous grey. So for this one I went with the 10% warm grey, and then I chose the 30% to go alongside it. Finally we have this beautiful, very pinkish red, of which I chose Carmine Red from the Prismas, and to go along with it, Crimson Red. So all in all, we've got 12 different pencils here that are going to match our palette, and we're going to be able to apply those to this illustration, and hopefully it will all turn out beautifully. So you know that I'm a big fan of limited colour palettes, because I think using too many colours on one page, it just detracts and there's nowhere really for the eye to settle. It's all, there's colour everywhere, which is not a bad thing, don't get me wrong, but I think the more that you limit your colours, the more cohesive it looks and the more appealing it looks to the eye. So there we are, colour palette 104 if you've got the colour catalogue and you want to colour along with me. If you haven't, there's going to be a link in the description for you to go ahead and buy your copy of the colour catalogue. As I say, it's absolutely full to the brim of all different kinds of beautiful colour palettes. And you also have the RGB CMYK numbers, the hex numbers as well. You've got the colour names, the keywords, the swatches, and of course the photograph that they're taken from. So absolutely amazing resource, which I dread to think how long this took to put together. So fantastic. Right, we'll move this to one side and we'll bring in our page again. So here we are. I'm going to just zoom it out a little so that we can see the whole of the illustration, or most of it anyway. And let's have just a quick think, a little plot about where we're going to put these colours. So we have grass at the bottom. Let's start from the bottom. And with the grass, obviously we've got 4 different greens that we can choose from here. So we've got the Prussian green and the apple green. And then we've got the more kind of olivey tones of the moss green and the lime peel. So really it's just kind of deciding where you want certain things to go. So the only other green that I can kind of see on here where I might put green would be on the leaves here of the rose on the shield. And there's not really too much more green on there, so maybe I'll use a combination of all of these tones, maybe starting with the darker kind of moss green at the bottom and putting flicks of apple green in there. We will see, but definitely we'll be using those in conjunction. Then we've got our cool greys, these ones here, and I think that these are perfect for metal, so creating silver metallic look. So these are the ones that I'm going to be using on the shield, on his armour, possibly on the horse armour as well. And then we move on to the warm greys, which obviously are a lot softer and a lot more natural, I feel, and they will be perfect on these rocky kind of mountainous areas in the background, and possibly also on this castle here. Might even bring in a little bit of the lime peel with it on the castle, just to show maybe some moss growth or something like that. Next up we have the blues. So we've got a kind of mid blue and a darker blue. Now the problem here is that we have water and a sky. So I could do a dark sky gradiating down to this lighter sky like this. But then that's going to leave me with a body of water that I don't really want to match the sky. So for that I'm thinking I may even bring in these greens again. The lime peel, the moss green, and possibly make this water a kind of greenish blue, or a greenish tinge anyway. We'll see. And then finally with the 2 kind of pinkish reds that I have here, obviously we've got the rose, we've got the emblems, and I'm thinking maybe we could have a little bit of red on the horse's armour as well. Honestly, I don't usually plan things. I usually jump straight in, and it most of the time turns out all right. So what I'm going to do is I am going to speed this up, but I'm going to talk to you over the top if I can get my voice recording thing working. If not, it'll just be some music and I'll come back to you after, but hopefully you'll enjoy watching either way. Okay, so starting with the sky, I'm taking the Copenhagen blue and adding a very light layer to the top to 3/4 half of the sky. So you can see that I'm darker at the top and I'm slowly phasing the colour out as I go down. I've then taken the cerulean blue and filled in the rest of the sky. Going back to the Copenhagen, I'm adding my second layer and deepening up that colour, but still not quite fully burnished, as you can see. So just going around the top half of the sky with the Copenhagen blue and slowly fading it out as I go down. Then I can come in with the cerulean blue and do another layer of that. So just covering the entire space until we have a second layer completely smooth. I'm then going to take my blending solution and with a paintbrush just quickly apply a light layer over everything. So you can see as soon as you add the blending solution, it starts to break down the wax and the binder in the pencil, and that just leaves the pigment behind. So you can see how deep and dark the colour is going just by adding this blending solution. It's completely clear and it dries perfectly. It doesn't leave any residue behind, but it does make a really nice surface for you to then go on and do your third layer of pencil, which you can see here that I'm doing with the Copenhagen. So after adding this blending solution, it makes everything super smooth and the pigment literally just slides off the pencil. It's so easy to colour. I'm then coming in with the cerulean and filling in everything else, making sure to go over the very edge of the Copenhagen so that it's all blended in very nicely. Now ideally I would have liked a lighter blue to fade into, but this is all I've got to work with this limited palette, so I'm hoping it will turn out okay. Just adding some final touches with the Copenhagen blue just underneath the bottom half of the clouds, so we've got a bit of a drop shadow going on there. So this is where I'm cheating just a little bit by bringing in some white, just on that lower horizon line above the castle and the clouds, to give a bit of a differentiation between the blue in the sky, because the Copenhagen and the cerulean really are quite similar and it's looking very solid and blocky at the moment. As I say, if I was doing it myself without it being a colour palette challenge, I would have used a lot more blues on that sky to make a better gradation, but we're just working at the moment with the limited palette and I've cheated a little and added some white. So here you can see I'm doing the castle walls. That's with our warm greys, and this is the darkest of the two warm greys. So I'm adding in the little lines and pockets of stone and bricks that the artist has left there for us. And then I'm going in with the lighter of the warm greys just to soften up those lines I've just created and make it look like it's shining in the daylight, but not like it's glossy. It's still got that very matte surface that we expect stones to have. Here I'm adding in some lime peel and a little bit of moss green to show some moss and growths that are growing up the castle walls. I'm doing exactly the same on the other side, so both of the warm greys are being used here, but no green this time because I just want to make it a bit different to the castle, different textures and different look to these stones. So just finishing off with that lightest warm grey now on the clouds, just adding a touch of shading here and there. There's no rhyme or reason to it whatsoever, but leaving some white as well, just to give it that look of 3-dimension and a little bit more interest than leaving it the plain white of the paper. Now going to other greys, so that's the cool greys, and I'm taking the darkest one first on the horse's armour and colouring in all the edges, so I'm leaving a white patch in the middle, and then taking the lighter cool grey just to soften that out, just like we did with the warm greys on the stone, and make it look a little smoother. So that's what I'm doing all over the armour here, just using those two cool greys to give the impression that we have some shiny silver armour, and I think it really works well. Obviously I am limited as I am with the sky, but I think that in absence of a darker cold grey just to really make the metal pop, it looks brilliant. I think it looks absolutely perfect. Now obviously at the moment, apart from the sky, we've got an awful lot of very desaturated colours going on here, but just wait until we get onto the reds and the greens, and hopefully that will make the whole picture just come to life. But I really like the effect that all of this silver has created. These discs, I coloured them as if they were vinyl records, so a little bit of darkness just in the centre and then the rest of it pale. Okay, so we're moving on to this body of water in the background now. You can see that I'm colouring the whole thing green, and you might be wondering what the hell's going through my mind, but there is a method in my madness. So because we are limited with colours, I'm going to have to get a bit creative and mix some colours a little bit to create the shades that we want. So obviously the sky is blue and we don't have any other blues to work with. So what I've done is I've put a layer of apple green down, medium pressure, and then over the top a layer of cerulean blue. So as you can see, this creates a very rough looking surface, and we're going to be using the blending solution just to even that out a little bit. So you can see I'm just painting it on here, just as I did with the sky, but we've still got a little bit too much green showing through. So we're going to need to do a final pencil layer over the top of the blending solution. So I'm coming back in with the cerulean blue now, hard pressure, completely burnishing it. And you can see that it is a beautiful deep blue colour that still has an essence of green about it, kind of like a cobalt turquoise. And it just differentiates from the sky, and we still haven't gone away from the colours that were chosen on the colour catalogue. So we're in keeping with the same pencils, but we're creating a completely different colour. Now I know that I cheated a little bit with the white pencil, so I'm going to continue that cheat and go the whole hog with a bit of white acrylic paint, just to create a bit of texture on the water, a bit of movement, kind of like lapping waves. Coming in now with the reds, we've got the crimson red and the carmine red, using the darker crimson in all the corners as the shadow, and then the carmine red to lighten up the whole tone. Also using that white pencil again, just in the centre of all the red areas, just to give it a super shiny glossy look. So I'm pretty much colouring the whole rider and horse in red and silver. And using these warm tones really brings out the centerpiece of this picture. It makes everything else just melt away into the background, and this really pops out to the eye. And I think the red and silver really complement each other as well. I think it's a beautiful kind of colour combination for armour that I might not have thought of unless I was doing this kind of challenge. So I'm really glad that I chose to do this. Just adding in the extra bits of silver now, and we're almost done. Okay, so now moving on to the grass, the last large section of the picture left to do. And you might know, you might not, but I am absolutely rubbish at trying to colour grass. It's a really rough texture, and I can never quite manage to colour it without it looking just too rough, if that makes sense. So I'm going in with the Prussian green and the apple green, just putting bits of grass blades all over, and then just adding a final layer of apple green over everything. Then, of course, my trusty blending solution over the whole lot to finish, and it looks quite smooth, it looks quite nice. Now I did have to cheat again just a little bit and bring out the neo colours just for the face and hair, and also the horse's legs and his mane and tail as well. I just had no luck trying to create the brown that I needed with the colours that we had. So just that little bit of transgression, so hopefully you can forgive me for that. But instead of using pencils, I did go for the neo colours, so I still haven't used any other pencils that I wasn't supposed to use. That's what I'm telling myself anyway. But I'm just adding more and more layers of neo colour just to the horse's hair, and I think you'll agree that it looks better than it would have done if I'd have tried to use lime peel or something weird like that. So there we have it. There is our finished picture done as a colour palette challenge from the amazing colour catalogue. Now I'm going to be leaving the link in the description if you want to go ahead and get yourself a copy of that fantastic resource. But as for this picture, even though we cheated a little bit with the white acrylic and the brown on the horse's hair and things like that, I still think that we stuck to the palette really, really well, and it's turned out fantastic. Now I wouldn't have actually chosen probably any of these colours apart from the silver on the armour if I was to do this picture without the challenge. So it's really taken me out of my comfort zone and shown me that you don't always have to stick to what you know to get good results. Sometimes you just have to push the boundaries a little bit, take it upon yourself to challenge yourself with different colours, things that you wouldn't normally use, different palettes, and this can be the result that you get. So really hope that you've enjoyed going through this. Well, it's kind of a colour along, sort of, but I just hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please leave me a comment and a thumbs up, and of course subscribe to the channel if you're not already. So thank you very, very much for watching, and I'll see you soon on Colour with Claire.